it's Joe, and I've snuck upstairs to film this because Jess is already asleep, and I'm knackered myself as well, so I've got to make it quick. I completely forgot to film today, I completely forgot to upload, but I've got clips from yesterday which I'm piecing together and uploading now, and yeah, I thought I'd just give you a very quick, I don't know, what should I talk about today? My day has been good, feeling a little tired, but otherwise good. Oh, I know what I could do. I could tell you a bit about what happened last week, because I very dramatically was like, Jess has been in hospital, but she's okay. So now I'll actually explain what happened a bit, because otherwise it's a little bit... Ooh, that's not a very nice angle in terms of lighting, is it? Let's go like this. Is that better? It's a little better. So yeah, basically, last week on Tuesday, I think. Ooh, sorry. On Tuesday, I went out for coffee with a friend, and while I was out, Jess randomly had a period of like an hour where she was getting really quite regular Braxton Hicks. If you don't know what Braxton Hicks are, they are like, it's like false labour. It's they're kind of like practice contractions, but it's unusual to get them for that long and to get them so regularly. She was having them like kind of about every 10 minutes for an hour. Because they stopped after an hour, she didn't really think much of it, but she did mention it to me when I got home. Anyway, but yeah, we were just both a bit like, that's a bit weird. And then, because it had stopped, we just kind of got on with, our day. But then in the evening, as we went to bed, Jess said she started feeling really sick, like really nauseous. And we were like, okay, well, hopefully it'll ease up by the morning. But unfortunately, it really didn't. It got loads worse. She ended up getting up to have to throw up. And then she started getting these Braxton Hicks again. And at this point, we were starting to get a little worried because we know that actually vomiting can be a sign of early labour. And we were like, this is a bit weird. Not really sure what's going on here. And then she started throwing up a lot. Like she had to go to the bathroom like a bunch of times in the night, throwing up tons, even when it was basically like there was nothing left there. She was still feeling so sick. And she was still getting these kind of, contraction type, Braxton Hicks type things. We managed to get some sleep between like 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. We had a little bit of respite from the kind of having to run to the bathroom loads. But again, we woke up and she had to go and throw up again. And at this point, the contractions, I think we start calling them contractions by then. We didn't. We kept calling them Braxton Hicks for hours, and then we were like... so these were starting to come fairly regularly. And we were like, it's time to call the midwives again. We had actually called her midwife at like 3 o'clock in the morning. We felt so awful doing it, but we were starting to get quite worried. And at that point, she was like, you know what, just like try to have a bath, take some paracetamol, and try to get some sleep and see how it goes, but call me if anything changes. And obviously that's what we did. She took a shower and did manage to get a few hours sleep, like I said, between 5 and 8, but because it was still happening, we thought, okay, we need to call her again this morning. So we did, we called her, we were like, look, this is what's going on, and she was like, okay, I'm going to say again, give it a little bit longer, take a really warm bath and stay in there for at least half an hour to try and calm things down. Try to have a little tiny something to eat so that you can take some paracetamol and see if you can keep that down. And again, let me know if anything changes. So we were like, okay. Jess tried to eat some cracker so that she could take some paracetamol, and she literally, she put like the tiniest, like maybe an inch square of cracker in her mouth, and she barely even swallowed it before she threw up. So taking paracetamol was out of the question. She was just throwing it up. So we were like, okay. So at this point, we're starting to think this is a problem, even if even if she's not going into early labour, because if she's not able to tolerate even the tiniest bit of food, then she's going to be getting really dehydrated and malnourished. So we kind of are going to need to probably go in. But again, we were like, okay, we'll take the midwife's advice. So we went and we ran her a nice warm bath. She was in there for like 45 minutes, and it did help. It did kind of slow things down, but, well, A, you can't stay in the bath forever, and B, even still, the contractions were coming like less than 10 minutes apart, quite consistently. I've said this to a few of my friends, but like, I really did not expect to be using the contraction timing part of my like dad app at 32 weeks. That was a real shock. Like earlier in the evening when she was really ill and she was having these pains, I was like, am I going to end up having to time contractions tonight? Like, no, I was like, surely not. And then, yeah, by the morning it was like, we need to be timing these because we need to know how far apart they are. Yeah, so we called the midwife back. We were like, she couldn't keep down even a tiny bit of cracker, so we couldn't do the paracetamol. The bath helped a bit, but they're still coming less than 10 minutes apart. And she was like, okay, it's time to get into triage then. You need to go and we need to make sure that she's not in early labour, and we need to stop. We need to get her able to be rehydrated and stuff. We need to get you on some antiemetics and get some fluids in you. So, yeah, off we went. Drove to triage of the maternity ward, and yeah, thankfully they were able to. We're really lucky, and like the healthcare around here is fantastic. We've been really, really grateful for how great all of the doctors and midwives and nurses and everything have been. So they were great. But yeah, they had to get her on some fluids immediately. She was very dehydrated. Gave her an antiemetic, which did stop her feeling sick. And actually, once she wasn't vomiting anymore, the contractions stopped, which is fantastic and like such a huge relief. And what the midwife said about that was that actually vomiting can start to set off early labour, and it can start to trigger contractions just because everything's getting so shaken up, which I guess makes sense, but like so alarming. So yeah, thankfully, once she was hydrated and she'd had the antiemetic, she wasn't throwing up anymore, and that stopped the contractions, which was a huge relief. But the party was far from over, because by that point, she'd been so kind of starved of hydration and of nutrients that she was like really in quite bad shape. So yeah, they had her on lots of fluids. They were giving her what else? They were giving her more antiemetics to keep her from feeling sick, but she could barely even tolerate sips of water. And obviously there's only so much that fluids can do. They can hydrate you to an extent, but like they can't feed you. And because she was still so kind of like weak and still not able to tolerate any food, and also because she had quite a fever by this point, they moved us to the advanced obstetrics care unit, which is kind of like maternity intensive care, I suppose. They were like, don't be alarmed, it's just that we need, you need a bit of a closer eye being kept on you. And I was like, don't be alarmed, are you serious? But yeah, so they moved us up there. And we were really lucky in that she had her own room, because obviously the kind of stomach bug that set the whole thing off was quite possibly still contagious. And when you're in labour/maternity ward, you really don't want to be potentially giving other pregnant women or tiny babies that kind of bug. So we had a separate room, which was really nice. But Jess's temperature was really high, and her heart rate was like really high. Her blood pressure was really low. And the really worrying thing was something which I have never even thought about before in terms of health, but basically Jess had really high ketones in her blood. Essentially what that means is, so when somebody does a diet like the Atkins diet, or any kind of like really low carb diet, what they're doing is trying to deliberately induce a kind of physiological state called ketosis, which is where your body doesn't have any like immediately available energy, like it doesn't have any food energy available to it, that it can make, like it doesn't have any glucose basically to use to make your energy, which is our kind of usual energy source. And so it's forced to start trying to get energy from your fat stores instead. Obviously, if you're trying to lose weight, you can see how you might think that that was a good thing. But if you go too far, well, it can be dangerous in general, but like if you go too far with it, it tips over from ketosis into something called ketoacidosis, I think is what it's called, which is basically where there's just way too much. The balance in terms of the chemicals in your body, in your blood, has gone off, and that can actually be fatal. And this is what was happening to Jess. She had gone into ketoacidosis, which if it's not corrected can be really dangerous. Specifically what it's called is starvation ketoacidosis. So it's because you've got no nutrients in your body, and so it's like kind of, it can happen to diabetics because of them not having the right amount of insulin in the body, but this particular one is called starvation ketoacidosis. And yeah, it can be super duper dangerous. Every case that I've read about it since, where it was specifically starvation ketoacidosis in pregnancy, they all led to emergency C-sections. So I feel like we were incredibly lucky to have gotten to the hospital quickly enough and to have had such great care. We had this really fantastic obstetrician coming in and checking on her really regularly, and just generally like clearly paying a lot of attention. And yeah, they kind of managed to gradually even things out. I mean, mostly what needed to happen was she needed to be well enough that she could actually eat and keep food down, because like I said, there's only so much that fluids can do. You need to be able to actually get food in you to reverse that kind of damage. And thankfully, eventually, once they had her temperature down, and she'd been kind of tolerating sips of water for a while, she was able to have some orange juice, and then by the morning she was able to have some toast. And then gradually over the course of the day, her ketones went down, and and she was okay. And the baby stayed where they belong, and we were able to leave the hospital on... When were we able to leave the hospital? Thursday? Friday? I lost all sense of time, like, just completely. It's kind of going back and forth from the hospital to home, making sure the cat was fed, like, trying to feed myself in amongst it, getting almost no sleep, like, I mean, I'm exhausted. I can't even imagine how exhausted Jess is. We've just about recovered now. We've been kind of having nice long lie-ins and stuff the past couple of days and trying to take it easy, but it was really scary. It was really scary. And I'm so grateful to the NHS, which is our kind of universal healthcare system in the UK. I could not even begin to say how grateful I am for the NHS in general, but particularly because of how well they dealt with this and managed to get her out of the woods and keep our bub where they belong. So yeah, that was our wild week last week. Very thankful that she's feeling better, and fingers crossed she stays feeling better. And gosh darn that bug, man. Who knew that a kind of straightforward stomach bug could be so dangerous in pregnancy? I guess I knew that it was bad for pregnant women to get any kind of illness, because that your immune system is kind of weakened when you're pregnant, because it needs to be, so that your body doesn't reject the baby. But I don't think I've really fully grasped why it's so dangerous for pregnant women to get even simple illnesses. And now I do. Alright, this is really long, so I'm going to go, but stay cool, and thanks for watching.